We American citizens should be allowed to choose which policy we want. But they conceal it from us. And I'm extremely angry that the people in this country who say they deplore this sort of thing have fallen silent. It's being condoned by the European Union and Washington as events unfold.
I got Senator Stern here. So we swing over and look at some of the...
And when you say the Western countries will bear some responsibility, in what sense do they bear responsibility?
There's a vision both ways.
Look at it through Moscow's eyes. Since the Clinton administration in the 1990s, the U.S.-led West has been on a steady march toward post-Soviet Russia.
This is a weapons demonstration.
Began with the expansion of NATO in the 1990s. Bush then further expanded NATO all the way to Russia's borders. Then came the funding of what are euphemistically called NGO.
I don't know if you know this, but I don't speak Russian! This is not what we agreed to. They promised me suits and they promised me drones.
Everything will be okay.
This is not what I wanted.
The political action group funded by the West, operating inside Russia. Then came the decision to build missile defense installations along Russia, allegedly against Iran, a country which has neither nuclear weapons nor any missiles to deliver them. Then comes American military outpost in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia, which led to the War of 208. And now the West is at the gates of Ukraine. That's the picture as Moscow sees it. And it's rational, it's reasonable, it's hard to deny. Let's ask ourselves this: who precipitated this crisis?
Anyway, carry on.
You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio Network on KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where the strange is just another day at the office and the unexplained is our playground.
Hi, this is Liam Martin with the Exiled Minds Podcast, and you're listening to the network that never stops seeking Troubled Minds Radio, KUAP Digital Broadcasting.
You're tuned into Troubled Minds Radio Network on KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where we peer into the future, embrace the power of AI, and delve deep into the conspiracies that shape our world.
Are you ready to dive headfirst into the enigmatic, mysterious world of the occult? Troubled Minds. Join the Arcane Observer on an explorational journey and unravel the ancient secrets, challenges, and boundaries of conventional knowledge and thinking. A fearless exploration into the occult with the Arcane Observer Minds Radio, unraveling the mysteries of a supernatural journey. Unlike your typical podcast, fearlessly embarking on a quest to demystify the occult, examining the paranormal, the esoteric traditions, and the unexplained. With open minds and a thirst for understanding, Minds Radio, explore ancient wisdoms, supernatural encounters, rituals, magic, conspiracy theories, and occult in popular culture. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or a curious observer, or someone just starting to peer into the shadows, the Arcane Observer invites you to join the electrifying expedition to the heart of Troubled Minds Radio, digital broadcasting.
You're tuned into Troubled Minds Radio Network on KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where we contemplate the mysteries of the cosmos through the lens of philosophy, magic, and more.
Welcome to the show, folks. This is Exiled Minds Podcast. Welcome. Episode number 54 today, Exiled Minds Podcast. Me, your incredibly famous host, Liam Martin, on the radio, Troubled Minds KUAP digital broadcasting, and also for video viewers, so we can have a bit of a TV station. Which reminds me, the Troubled Minds Radio Network is going to be branching out into doing TV, Troubled Minds TV. So that's something coming for 2024, Year of the Dragon. And talking of Eastern cultural stuff, we're kind of covering that show sort of today. Today on the Exiled Minds Podcast, we're going to have a look at the Mystery of the Yeti. See how that sort of pans out. You know, I used to come across this listening to trance music. And there is a special trance album, a compilation album by different artists that have made sort of Yeti tracks. So, but I never really actually got into looking into it that much. So I thought, hey, you know what? Let's do a Yeti one today instead of the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch, because they're kind of interrelated. I thought we'll see what the difference is and see what's what. And I remember to look in the chat, and here in the chat, hello, Daryl. We've got Dark Devious, my brother, my crypto brother, but he's real. Nice to see you. Nice to see you could join us. I don't know. I think it's gone out to YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, and Twitch today, going live. Hopefully, it should be on Facebook as well. And let's have a look in the Rumble. I don't know if the Rumble chat comes in here. No, Rumble sometimes goes wrong. Things go a bit weird with Rumble. It's a bit of it's tough setting it up, to be honest. But let's just go back, see if there's anything on the old Rumble thing. Because I don't want to miss them out. Do you know what I mean? Don't be ignorant. My channel. There we go. Oh, anyway, just get on with the show. We'll not worry about Rumble just yet. I'll see if we can get it on in the break. Anyhow. Oh, yeah. We're live. Oh, I managed to confirm it. Yes, anyway, so Mystery of the Yeti today. So, yeah, it looks like everything's going out okay. Everything's streaming all right. So, let's get on with it then. So, join us on an exhilarating expedition into the heart of the Himalayas, the Exiled Minds Podcast. Today's gripping show delves into the deep and enigmatic mysterious world of the legendary Yeti, blending adventure, folklore, and cultural exploration. Embark on a thrilling journey alongside me, the intrepid explorer in the Exiled Minds Podcast, seasoned researcher, doing the work so you don't have to, but obviously stand on the shoulders of giants. I'll be getting information from like local guides and stuff that have ventured into the majestic, treacherous landscape of Nepal, Tibet, Bhutan, probably the Kingdom of Brunei areas and that far east. Their mission to unravel the mysteries surrounding the elusive creature known as the Yeti, the legendary Abominable Snowman. So, unusual thing to give it, abominable. That's like when you feel totally awful and really bad about yourself, really super depressed. Like crap. So no, you might be happy, you know. But anyway, through riveting storytelling and me and first-hand accounts, we'll witness the fusion of ancient folklore, indigenous wisdom, modern scientific inquiry, and encounter gripping tales passed down through generations, exploring the cultural significance of the Yeti, Himalayan communities, and its portrayal in local myth and traditions. We'll experience the challenges and triumph as we try to navigate through the rugged terrain, extreme climates, and the allure of the unknown pulls us forward. So we'll discover diverse perspectives from skeptics questioning the existence of the creature to believers deeply rooted in the tales of the Yeti's existence. Could be culturally significant, central to your culture. So through a compelling analysis and encounters with the locals steeped in Himalayan culture, we'll look at this legend and see if it is a captivating glimpse of the intersection of folklore, exploration, and the human quest for understanding the unexplained. So prepare to immerse yourself on an odyssey that explores the blurred lines between legend and reality, hopefully leaving audiences captivated with this enduring and alluring mystery of the Yeti and its cultural tapestry woven by legend and in the breathtaking Himalayas. And we'll have a look at the Himalayas then. Should we get a Himalayas picture in the background? Should we do that? I wonder if we can. I think we can, you know. Himalayas. We'll do that. That'll be fun, won't it? I'll get some nice image up. Himalayas. I just put some pictures in the background. Okay, yes. So, the mystery of the Yeti. Yeah, we'll just do this. Look. And we'll just show the screen there. Oh, it's not showing it. Get rid of me. Here we go. You'll have some mountains in the background. Right, we're working. Caught up with the stream. Yes, the mystery of the Yeti. And so, yeah, up in the Himalayas. I wonder if there's a difference between this stuff. I just got wondering about it, you know. So then I decided, well, seeing as though we've got all these technologies at our disposal these days, I could just go on a few browsers and stuff and search up this stuff. But these days, you haven't got to do that exactly. You can get a computer to help you out with a chat GPT. I happen to have it as a side thing on my browser. So it's just there. So just ask it questions. Soon it'll have voice. It'll be like the Star Trek thing. But yeah, it's just handy to get it to look things up for you. So, and yeah, and it helps me write a bit of a script, so which I can share with you. I'll just tell you what I asked it. I like to sort of let people know what actually I did with it. So you can see how easy it is to just sort of do it yourself. So this is me. So I'll do the you and me then with the computer. So I've gone in and just said, look, I was just wondering about, you know, the Yeti and stuff. And I was wondering what you could tell me about the mystery of the Yeti. And what's the difference between the Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch? Okay, so the Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch, they're all legendary ape-like creatures. They're known in different regions around the world, each with its own distinct name and cultural significance. And so, here are the primary differences between the Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch. First, the Yeti. The Yeti is also known as the Abominable Snowman. It is predominantly associated with the Himalayan region in Asia. Described as a large ape-like creature living in snowy mountain terrain, it's part of the folklore and mythology of indigenous communities in Nepal, Tibet, Bhutan, and surrounding areas. The Bigfoot, however, also known as Sasquatch, is a similar creature, but is more commonly associated with North American folklore, particularly the Pacific Northwest of the United States of America and parts of Canada as well. It's described as a large, hairy, ape-like being that supposedly roams forests and mountain areas. Sasquatch is essentially just another name for Bigfoot and used interchangeably in North American folklore. The term Sasquatch comes from the indigenous Koscilla word of Sisquak. I think that's, I probably butchered that, which means wild man or hairy man. So we've got the natives talking about this, saying, hey, it's just, yeah, the hairy man. And they talked about other stuff as well that I reckon turns out to probably be true. Giants, at least. And yeah, I don't know about the ant people. I ain't going much for that. We've had a lot of giant stuff found in America, haven't we? So I think they're pretty reliable. Been around a while. Been logging down the history. Those natives, but anyway, yes, the natives call it the hairy man or wild man. That's a widely used term, Sasquatch, in the Northwest to refer to this legendary creature. And while the creatures Yeti, Bigfoot, and Sasquatch come from different cultural backgrounds and regions, they share similarities in their description as large, hairy, bipedal beings. And they all exist within the realm of folklore and mythology without definitive scientific evidence supporting their existence. Each has its own cultural significance within the communities where the legends originated. Okay, so So they've got it seems like it's a similar thing, but there's different cultural meanings for it, and so got different associations. But anyway, going on. So I thought, well, is there any what else you can tell me about the Yeti? Because I want to focus on the Yeti more than the Bigfoot, because I think there's something about this, and like I say, it was a personal thing from the trance music, Mysteries of the Yeti. You get thinking, now's the time to start looking into it. So this legendary ape-like creature is an inhabitant of the Himalayas, mountains of Asia. It's part of the folklore and mythology of various indigenous communities in the region. The descriptions of the Yeti vary, but is often depicted, like I say, as a large ape-like creature covered in fur and standing upright. Many reports of Yeti sightings or encounters have been made over the years, but there's no scientific evidence confirming their existence. Some suggest that these sightings might be attributed to other animals like bears, or even the imagination fueled by the harsh conditions and the isolation of living in the Himalayas. Expeditions have been conducted in search of the Yeti, which explorers and scientists trying to gather evidence such as footprints, hair samples, and other supposed traces of the creature. However, no conclusive evidence supporting the existence of the Yeti has been found so far. The legend of the Yeti continues to capture the imagination of many and remains a subject of interest and fascination, blending myth and mystery in remote, rugged terrains of the Himalayas. So yeah, it's a bit of a mysterious place, I suppose, up in the mountains, living in the clouds. And on top of this as well, like I said, there's harsh conditions. And the computer suggests that one of the explanations could be your imagination or hallucination fueled by the harsh conditions. So I thought, well, does that happen? Do you hallucinate when it's cold? So I've asked it. Does cold weather cause people to hallucinate? So let's look at that, because it's either a real encounter, maybe, or like I say, it could be hallucination. So we'll go down this road then and see what's what. There's a scientific explanation. Oh, and sightings, yeah, there isn't an exact number of sightings. Oh, I meant to do this bit. Yeah, let's switch this then, because the exact number of sightings, before I get to can the cold make you hallucinate, I asked how many sightings there were, and it said it's really difficult to say exactly how many sightings are, because it's such remote regions, and stories have been passed down. But I thought instead, then I'll have a look at. We'll look at how many Sasquatch sightings, and I've managed to find this map. If anyone finds it of interest, if you want to check it out, there's a map of potential Sasquatch sightings, and in all, it's public broadcast. So this is from pbs.org. Is that what public broadcasting? I don't know, but this is from www.pbs.org, and this is back 2013, 20th September. So there's probably more sightings now, but I just happened to come across this where it was showing that there's a map. All 3,313 Sasquatch sightings have been mapped, according to this article. And it shows you on the map that purple colours on the map are kind of high, and green colours on the map are high. Black colours are population size is sparse. So looking at the map, it looks like that the population's highest up in the west there. And it says sightings are quite rare on the east. So it seems like it's a lot more to the west side. Reportedly rare, following populations. Yeah, okay, let's have a read then. So you can check this out, links in the description, or www.pbs.org. So it goes on to explain then that you've got these 3,313 sightings. The large, hairy humanoid creature that supposedly lurks in the Northwest Pacific of Canada and the United States has been spotted. Apparently, it's been spotted more than 3,000 times. I wanted to point this, even though we're going to focus on the Yeti, I thought I'd have a look at this because we haven't really got numbers, but because it seems like a very similar creature. I'm thinking maybe we can extrapolate this and say whatever numbers they've got for sightings, that's, let's say, at least half that number for Yetis, because, a bit more sparsely populated or whatever. I thought just to give us a bit of a figure, so we've got some kind of an idea, roughly how many times these things have been seen. Try and get an idea sort of how realistic it might be that they're there, Just thinking also like for the UFO encounters, so, that kind of thinking that if there's that many, then, there's got to be, legit. But anyway, yeah, it's apparently been spotted or reported more than 3,000 times. And so there's going to be people who didn't report it. All right. And using the data compiled from the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, Penn State PhD candidate Josh Stevens, who specializes in big data maps and visualization, has geoplotted every Sasquatch sighting since 1921. Looking at reported sightings compared to population density, he found distinct, sparsely populated regions with regular sightings. The densely populated areas were the areas where the sightings are more rare. And you would expect sightings, is as a quote, you would expect sightings to be the most frequent in areas where there are a lot of people, because there's more people, so the more chance of having a sighting. But Stevens wrote about the project. The desire to find or think you saw a Bigfoot might be especially high if you've heard tales of a giant ape-like creature calling the place you're in home, when your home is. Okay, so a combination of environment and legends likely combine to at least put weary outdoorsmen on the lookout. Okay, so yeah, you want to keep an eye out. But I think it's the other way. I think they're looking at this wrong. That they're probably going to try to be away from people. You think, yeah, where it's highly populated, more likely there's more people to have sightings. But not if the Bigfoot aren't there. Not if the Sasquatch isn't there. They would probably want to avoid us, especially as what's going to happen. And they're probably only encountering hunters anyway. And maybe they're intelligent and they need to kind of stay away. Because if you get caught by a human, you're probably going to end up in a lab, or you're going to end up in a circus kind of thing. It's something like that, I would say. So they're saying, yeah, you would expect most frequent in the areas where there's a lot of people. But no, they're going to avoid us, aren't they? If you're smart, they're going to be stealthy, I would think. You're trying to stay away from the apex predator normally. So I would say they're going to be living in regions where there's hardly anybody there. But Himalayas, bit of a tough place. Won't be your ideal spot, would it? But moving on back to the Yeti, I just wanted to get a sort of idea of what kind of numbers we're looking at. So there's been over 3,000 sightings just on this article from like 10 years ago. And I do believe if you go to Google and put Bigfoot sightings, it says about 10,000. There we go. Let's have a look for the camera. I didn't put how many. Let's go how many and then see what it comes up with, because I'm sure I've seen a figure of like 10,000. So we've got the PBS said 3,300. I'm sure I saw a figure come up. Well, let's leave it at that. That's cool. Quite a significant number, I would say. And I can't find a more up-to-date one. We've got a list of the top 9, but it's not going to give us more numbers, I don't think. Just a bit more of a map. So the most sightings. Or northwest, down the west there, but it's had quite a few sightings in Texas apparently. So yeah, I mean, so let's say, okay, there's a few. We've had a few, so maybe there's something legit about this. Okay, so moving on to this next top 10 sightings for the Yeti then. So I'll have a quick. I'll go into reader mode and then be a bit better on the camera. Get rid of the big camera. I'll have the little camera. Right then, so let's do it. Top 10 Yeti and Abominable Snowman sightings. We'll just try and get it through a couple of these before we go to the break. So, in the course of 30 or so trips to the Himalayas, I've heard of this. Oh, sorry, this is from GrahamHoyland.com. So, top 10 Yeti and Abominable Snowman sightings. In the course of the 30 or so trips to the Himalayas, I've heard many tales about the Yeti from Sherpas, and they were clearly believers. They are very similar stories to local villagers all along the Himalayas, from the Arunachal Pradesh of Lanka, and even through the names, even though the names changed, they're still talking about these 3 kinds of Yeti. They all range in size and environment. First, the largest is the terrifying Dizte, who stands 8 foot tall when he is on his back legs. However, he prefers to walk on all 4s. He can kill a yak with one swipe of his claws. And then there's a smaller Chuti, or Telma. That's a little reddish-coloured, child-sized creature who walks on 2 legs and has long arms. He is seen in the forest of Sikkim in Nepal. So they've got some long-armed little red-like creature in the forests, and one that likes to walk on all 4s. That's like 8 foot tall. Is the largest one in the colder places. And then there is a third one, the Mete, who is the most like man and has orangey red fur on his body, supposed a bit like an orangutan. And he attacks humans and is one of the most often depicted on the monastery's wall paintings. So you find them on the monasteries as well. So they obviously think they're legit. The Yeti, or Yeti, is the mutation of his name. He looks most like the Tintin in Tibet Yeti. So the Yeti then is just an amalgamation of the names there. So it should be the Mete. Okay, the Yeti. All right then. So we've got 10 of the top sightings that this guy's writing about. Graham Hoyland. He says below here, we've got 10 top sightings from some of my personal experiences. And you can read more about this in his book, Yeti. So, sighting number 1. So, just get through one of these at least before the break. Sighting number 1. The Sonam Hisha Sherpa from Nepal in the 1960s. Some of the Sherpas I climbed with had stories about female yaks being attacked and yak herders terrorized by a creature that sounds like an enormous dite. In 1986, Yamach Bazar, capital of the Sherpa Khumbu region, he met someone called Sonam Hishta Sherpa. 20 years previously, he had been grazing. He had grazing his yaks and cows in the cross of a doe, high on the pasture. During the night, he heard loud whistling and bellowing while he cowered with fright in the cave with his companions. They were sure that they were going to be killed by the Dutta after it had finished off the livestock. In the morning, Sonam and his men found two of these does had been killed and eaten, but no meat on the bones was remaining, only the blood and the dung and the intestines. So he'd stripped them bare. So they had an encounter with a Yeti that totally stripped bare all the meat. So that would terrify you. You'd think, oh my God, it was probably like really hungry. You know what I'm saying? That's probably how that works. But anyway, we've got to go for a break. So let's get some show music on and we'll just drop that in there. Just bear with us for a quick little break. The Exiled Minds Podcast with me, your famous host, Liam Martin. We'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome to the Troubled Minds Radio Network on KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where we delve into the mystical, philosophical, and the cosmic in our quest to uncover the unknown.
I think I got a weird connection.
You're saying that this is one single cell?
It's not unprecedented. The ostrich egg is a single cell and it can grow up to 5 pounds.
Because we were almost impacted by Venus. This is all fully understood. And the astrophysicists have to look at this, and the people that are geologists, and all the is.
They supersize the common core, which, as it turns out, is disgusting.
Obviously, somebody's playing with us.
Yeah, they're showing off. Killing epidemiologists with the common cold. It is a bit.
All the is lead What's this?
I want to know who's next.
At least identified as we tried, but the computer went off the chart.
Maybe we can figure out who's next.
Normal human beings have 40 DNA mammal groups, which is more than enough for each species to perpetuate itself. This had 200,000.
You did it. What was that? How did you do that?
It was September. He was part of the original 12-sign travel back to observe humanity. He was banished for sympathy. Fugitives signed tracking. The same fugitives were in possession of the anomaly.
Why go to such lengths to protect a genetic defect?
I do not know. I would like a protocol suspension to travel back to when I can eradicate these existers.
We are not predicted to you with a readjustment of probability. They exploited you. The fugitives are inconsequential. He poses minimal risk. We chose this time for a reason. A 99.9999% probability that we will succeed.
The boy had a 0.0001% chance of survival. He did.
Is there something wrong with you?
1%. I am experiencing something that I do not understand. The idea of ending their existence consumes me.
They are insignificant. So, no.
Some people believe that crystals have spiritual properties and can be used to connect with the ancient civilization of Atlantis. They believe the crystals were once used by the Atlanteans for spiritual healing, meditation, and communication. Some people believe that the crystals can still be used for these purposes today. The Atlantis crystal power myth is the belief that crystals from Atlantis have special powers. This myth is often associated with the idea that Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that was destroyed by a natural disaster. Some people believe that the crystals from Atlantis survived the disaster and can be used to tap into the power of Atlantis. Have you ever tried? Check out Spirit Magica Crystal Shop and use coupon code Troubled Minds, all one word, for 25% off your first purchase.
Welcome back to the show, folks. Exiled Minds Podcast. With your incredibly famous host, Liam Martin. Today, 54th episode. Thanks for being with us on the break. Exiled Minds Podcast, streaming live on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. And we're also going to, where else are we going? There's one more. We've got Facebook. Just started doing that on Facebook and Twitch recently. And soon we'll be going live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP, digital broadcasting. And I appreciate you give us a like, share, subscribe, especially check out the radio station as well, because so we're going to try and do a TV station too. Well, it's going to happen. So we're coming out of beta. We're going in the numbers soon, so pretty cool. And thanks to Marie. Good morning. G'day. Hurl another tiger prawn towards the outdoor grill, mom. Dark Devious keeps listening to me in the shower. I'm getting worried. Not really. It's nice to have fun. It's nice to be loved. That's all I can say. Anywho, okay, let's talk about Yetis then. Today we're talking Exiled Minds Podcast. We're talking about the Mystery of the Yeti. I always wondered about it because it was this trance album that I used to listen to and hear bits and I think, oh, it's so mysterious thinking about it, and then all the trippy music. So today we're going on an expedition into the Himalayas and talk about the Yeti. Right, we'll we had a top 10 sightings here from a guy who's been to the Himalayas like 20 times. So I thought, okay, we check out what this guy's got to say, because this is a modern person still alive, and a lot of these sightings are a bit more rare in the Himalayas because look at the weather, and plus, you know what I mean, probably the environment's changing all the time. There's snow in that, it's going to keep covering things up. So if you're white, in fact, I put 2 Yetis in my poster, my thumbnail poster, and you can't really see them because they blend in with the snow in the background. So I had to put one of them in the O for Mystery Of. I put a little Yeti in the O, see if you can, because they can see that. But the one in the snow, they put them on the snow, and you can't see it. You can't find it. So it's like a Where's Wally thing with the snow situation. And like I say, keep changing. So they're probably a lot harder to see. And because people are more spread out, they're not as likely to see them. So yeah. So I think these Yeti ones, there might be something about this. And there's a cultural link as well. So we'll get to that. There's a cultural link with practices that they do. We looked at this first sighting in the Yeti where someone seen it, smashed up, it killed a doe, killed a yak kind of thing. And so, yeah, but that's first sighting that we read about was from the 1960s. That's Soman Hishta Sherpa in Nepal, seen one. Sighting number 2 is from way, way back. This is from Brian Horton Hodgson in Nepal in the 1830s. So the earliest Western account of a wild man in the Himalayas dates back from 1832 and is given to Brian Horton Hodgson, the court of Nepal's first British resident and the first Englishman permitted to visit the Forbidden Land. Hodgson had to contend with the hotbed that was, and still is, the Nepalese government. Apparently it's a hotbed. The Nepalese government are awkward. He was particularly interested in the natural history and ethnography of the religion. And so his report carries some weight because he was like, he was one of those people studying this stuff, and he managed to convince the Nepalese government to sort of let him go to the so-called Forbidden Lands. And I think that I can understand they're quite protective in Nepal as well because they've got the Buddha situation there. And back in the day, China was kind of sort of took over Tibet sort of thing, and then it became Chinese government, the CCP, and then like during the Second World War that was. And then just to explain it for a minute, I'll put a small one on. Yeah, just to explain the history. Yeah, so the Buddha was there, and he asked Britain to help, and it was during the Second World War, and they're like, "Oh, busy World War." So India ended up taking the Buddha, the Dalai Lama. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of kerfuffle with that. So that sort of region, Nepal and Tibet, they are kind of like secretive of stuff or protective of it, let's say. So that's the history of that. That's why it mentions that. And yes, so the fact that he got to go through, and that's in the 1830s, is quite significant. So his report should carry a lot of weight. Now, what he recorded, that his native hunters had been frightened by a wild man. Religion had introduced Banda monkey, the rhesus macaque, so the Banda monkey, the rhesus monkey, into the central region, where it was allowed to flourish, half domesticated in the neighborhood of temples. You might have seen some of these in the populous valley of Nepal proper. So where it's popular in Nepal down the valley, I think you can look at videos of them on the internet. Quite sort of semi-domesticated monkeys. Come and give them fruit and stuff. Sometimes they'll come and nick one. But anyway, going on in this sighting, it says, "My shooters were alarmed once these men had been roused by this ape man." It says, "My shooters were alarmed and by the apparition of a wild man, or possibly an orang. But I doubt their accuracy. They mistook the creature from the Kadko demon or the Rakshas demons and fled from it instead of shooting it." So he's saying, "No, I should have shot it, and not sure." And it moved, they said, erectly and was covered with long dark hair and had no tail. So this is why it's significant, because this guy's got weight and it's saying there was something there, long dark hair, got no tail, and they couldn't identify it. These guys thought it was a demon. There's locals. But this Brian Hodgson. He was like, no, something else. It's not a demon. But yeah, the third sighting then, that's Ptolemy the Elder, and that's in 300 BC in India. Alexander the Great was sent out to conquer Persia and India in 326 BC, penetrating nearly as far as Kashmir. He heard about strange wild men of the snows. I think this is where we're looking more toward the Yeti one. So strange wild men of the snows that were described as something like the treacherous of the lustful Greek gods, with the body of a man, but but it's got horns and the legs of an animal. So you remember them a bit like the Satri, a bit like like a hybrid. So it's got the body of a man, but it's got the horns on the head, and then some legs and feet of an animal. So it might be like trotters, like a sheep, lower half, man's torso, man's like upper body bit, and he's got horns coming out. Maybe we've seen depictions of that. When Alexander the Great, of course, hears of this, Alexander demanded to have one of them brought to him. Well, don't believe it, mate. Bring it, show and tell. Indeed. So the local villagers said the creature could not survive at low altitude. Later, Ptolemy the Elder wrote in his Naturalis Historia, "In the land of the cities in the mountains that lie to the east of India, live creatures that are extremely swift, as they can run on both 4 or 2 feet. They have bodies like a man, but because of their speed, can only be caught when they are ill or old. So nobody can catch them. They're way too fast." And that's from an old Roman account. So we've got that sighting number 4. We've got another one from the 19th century as well. So sighting number 4, we've got Major Lawrence Waddell, Northern India, circa 1889. The first sightings of the Yeti footprints by a Westerner was made by an English soldier and explorer, Major Lawrence Waddell. So he's a major in the forces. He was a professor of Tibetan culture and a professor of chemistry, a surgeon, and an archaeologist. Get this guy. He was a major, probably maybe in the army. I'm going to guess there's going to be a major in the army in them days. It wouldn't be the Air Force. So army major and a professor of Tibetan culture and a professor of chemistry and a surgeon and an archaeologist. And he roamed Tibet in disguise. He's thought to have some of the real life precursors of the film character. Oh, he's supposed to be one of the precursors of Indiana Jones. Okay. One of his first, remember his name then. So Major Lawrence Waddell might have been the inspiration for Indiana Jones. And here he is going through the ice. And he's very accomplished. And one of his theories included a belief that the beginning of civilization dated back from the Aryan Sumerians, who were blonde Nordic with blue eyes. These theories were later picked up by the German Nazis and led to their exploration of Tibet in 1938 and 1939. Because they were looking for artifacts as well. You know, it's the thing like the Ubermen, and they're looking for trying to make super soldiers sort of thing. And they believe that these Aryan Sumerians that's really stood out, because this is in the Middle East, where Sumeria is where Iraq is now. So Nordic looking, Norwegian looking blue-eyed people would stand out like a sore thumb. And you get them in the South American stories as well. Blonde people with white skin and blue eyes were supposed to be the gods that made some of them temples. So I think it's like an ancient civilization. It was probably a mixture of races, like a global civilization. Or maybe it's extraterrestrials, which we're allowed to talk about now. So who knows? But this is the inspiration and the reason for going and searching Tibet and searching lots of India, trying to find these sort of artifacts, these strange mysteries like the Yeti. He was trying to figure them out, So his story goes, while exploring the Northeast, skimming in 1889, Wendell's party came across a set of large footprints that the servants said were made by the Yeti, a beast that was highly dangerous and fed on humans. Quote, "Some large footprints in the snow led across our track and away up to the higher peaks. These were alleged to be the trail of the hairy wild men who were believed to live amongst the eternal snows, along with the mythical white lions, whose roar is reputed to be heard during the storms. Perhaps these were avalanches. Maybe that wasn't the lions, but who knows, right? Or maybe it was the roar of the Yeti to cause avalanches. I don't know. Maybe it's one of them. It's a little thing I throw in there. The belief in these creatures is universal among Tibetans. None, however, of the many Tibetans who have, or the writer Graham Hoyland, he says none of the Tibetans who he interrogated on the subject could ever give me an authentic case. One of the most superficial investigations it always resolved into something I heard a tale of. Okay, so he's saying there's not that many people, even though it's been lots of times, there's not that many people that's got first-hand accounts, and a lot of them is tales of old. But these so-called hairy wild men are evidently the great yellow snow bears, which is highly carnivorous and often kills yaks. Yet, although most of the Tibetans know this bear sufficiently to give it a wide berth, they live in such an atmosphere of superstition that they are ready to find extraordinary and supernatural explanations to uncommon events. So he's saying that they have a tendency to lean towards the supernatural, which is interesting, and that kind of comes in later. So, because I'm thinking towards trance. Okay, I'll drop a little hint there. But sighting number 5, another military officer, a lieutenant colonel this time, Charles Howard Bury. Charles Howard Bury in Tibet in the 1920s, leader of the 1921 Everest reconnaissance expedition. Charles Howard Bury saw something strange when he was crossing the Lakpa at 21,000 feet. Howard Bury was one of the extraordinary Everesters. He was wealthy and moved easily in high society. He had the most colourful life growing up in a haunted Gothic castle in a Charleville county off Flay Island. So he lived in a ghost castle and then went intrepid exploring up Everest. Okay. Then in 1905, he stained his skin with walnut juice and travelled to Tibet without permission, being ticked off by the Viceroy of India, Lord Curzon, on his return to Tibet, which was heavily crowded in heavily stained Englishmen at the time. He brought a bear cub, named it Agu, and took it home to Ireland, where it grew into a 7-foot adult. So he was familiar with bear prints. So this guy that had a sighting already kind of had an ape that he took home. Kind of what? He brought a bear. He brought a bear cub, named it Agu, and took it home. So he was quite familiar with bears, the guy who's doing this next sighting. So he kind of knows what bear prints look like because he had one. Okay. So Howard Bury was prone to telling tall stories? That's a good question. A fellow Everester, George Malloy, didn't much like him, but thought he wouldn't tell lies about it. He won't make stuff up, even though he didn't like the guy. He's like, yeah, give him his dues. He's probably not going to make this stuff up. Okay. I'll just get this off screen. So Howard Bury's diary notes say, from the 22nd of September, 1921, we distinguished hare, as in rabbits and hares, we distinguished hare and fox tracks, but one mark, like that of a human footprint, was most puzzling. The coolies assured me that it was the track of the wild hairy man, and that these men were occasionally to be found in the wildest and most inaccessible mountains, the eternal snows I mentioned before, where it's hard to get to. Yeah, it's hard for us to be there, so they can stay away from us. Later, he expanded the story. He reported that the party, including Mallory, who's the guy I didn't really like him but said I don't think he'd lie, who also saw some of the tracks. So the guy that didn't like him but said no, I don't think he'd lie, also had seen some of the tracks, and they were camped at 20,000 feet. They set off at 4 a.m. in a bright moonlight to make their crossing of the pass. On the way, they saw the footprints, which, quote, were probably caused by a large looping grey wolf, which is in the soft snow, formed double tracks rather than those like a barefooted man. However, the porters at once volunteered that the tracks must be of the wild man of the snows, in which they gave it the name Metog Kangmi. So that's another one that sounds a bit like they're not sure, they're not really convinced, they don't know what they are, but the locals are like, nah, it's definitely that. So it said they're quite superstitious. So I don't know about that one. Sighting number 6, William Hugh Knight in Tibet in 1888. One of the best-known explorers of Tibet and a member of the British Royal Society's Club said that he had seen one of the wild men from a fairly close distance sometime previously. He hadn't reported it before, but felt that due to the statements about the man-like footprints that Howard Burry's party had encountered, he thought it's best he better say. He said he was now compelled to add his own evidence to the growing pile. So he'd seen it and then started hearing other stories and started to think, this is the thing I'd seen. So William Hugh Knight, he says that the wild man, quote, is a little under 6 feet high. You might have seen one of the red ones then. It's talked about 3 different types. So his was a little under 6 feet high, almost stark naked in the bitter cold. It was and it was in the month of November. So it was cold. You can handle that stuff. It was the kind of pale yellow all over, about the colour of a Chinaman, and shock of matted hair on his head. Little hair on his face, slightly splayed feet, and large, formidable hands. His muscular development in the arms, thighs, legs, back, and chest was terrific. He had in his hand what seemed to be some form of primitive bow. Interesting. That is interesting. Because, apes, if they got themselves together and started making tools, they could do this. I've got a lot of muscle. Sometimes you can get to see maybe a chimpanzee they get a disease where the hair don't grow. Maybe they've got alopecia. You can see the muscle. They've got wicked muscles everywhere on the body. They've got denser muscle than us as well. They're bigger and being used all the time. Honestly, they're way stronger. They beat Mike Tyson. Beat a man. So, yes, maybe there is people. Maybe there's other hominids. Like we did the Crystals, the Star Child Skull show. Although YouTube said they were going to take it down. I don't know if they did or not. It seems to still be there for me. But yeah, they took down one of the previous shows about that Star Child Skull with some anomalous things about it. And was looking at the pre-hominids and pre-man, upright walking apes, Homo erectus and such. So maybe it's one of those missing that we've not really seen. Do you know what I'm saying? And they do talk about a missing link, and I didn't think there was one because we haven't found one yet, and for other reasons. But maybe that's it. So you think they were going out looking for it a bit more? But anyway, we'll get through. We've got 3 left, so let's look at sighting number 7 then. So Major Bill Tillman, Northern India, 1937. Quote: while contouring around the foot of the ridge between the 2 feeder glaciers, we saw in the snow the tracks of an abominable snowman. They were 8 inches in diameter, 18 inches apart, and almost circular, without a sign of toes or heels. But if they're making bows, they might have made shoes as well. Possibly. They were 3 or 4 days old. So melting must have altered the outline. So the toes might have disappeared. The most remarkable thing was that they were in a straight line, one behind the other, with no stagger, left or right, like a bird's paw. Okay, they're putting the one foot right in front of the other instead of having one left, one right. Okay. A 4-footed animal walking slowly puts his hind foot in the track of its forefoot, but there are always some marks of overlap, nor are the tracks immediately in front of each other. However many-legged it was, the bird or beast was heavy. The tracks, being nearly a foot deep, we followed them for a mile when they disappeared on some rocks. The tracks came from the glacial pool where the animals had evidently drunk. And the next day, we picked up the same spoor on the north side of the snow lake. The Sherpa judged them to belong to the smaller type of snowman or Yeti. So the mid-range one, yeah, maybe they come across that one. So a couple of sightings of the more human-like one instead of the little one, and the really powerful one, the 8-footer that don't like people. So as they call them, of which there are apparently 2 varieties. In his account, they're saying there was 2. There's only 2 varieties at this stage. There was a smaller one where the spore, when it means a spore, it means the trail where you put the feet, the trail. But one in front of the other, which feeds on men. Okay, so the 2 varieties, of which there are apparently 2 varieties. The smaller, which feeds on men, whereas the larger brother confines himself to a diet of yaks. My remark that no one had been here for 30 years and that it must be a devilishly hungry did not amuse the Sherpas as much as expected. The jest was considered ill-timed, and perhaps it was, the 3 of us standing on the fallen alone in the great expanse of the snow, looking at the strange tracks like so many Robinson Crusoes. Tillman speculates on the nature of the creature. A one-legged carnivorous bird, weighing perhaps a ton, might make similar tracks, but it seems unnecessary to search for a new species when we have perfectly satisfactory one at the hand of the form of the Abominable Snowman. New perhaps to science, but old to legend. They followed the footprint for a further mile. His diary notes that 16 inches apart, about 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Blokes say it is a hairy like monkey. So that's what the was he a lieutenant? No, he's a major. That's what the Major Tillman said. Major Bill Tillman. And then there's another one that we've got in Mount Everest. I think we can just squeeze this in before the break. I don't know. Eric Shipton. Oh, this one's quite long, this is. So I've got Eric Shipton, 1951. On one of the glaciers, the height of about 19,000 feet, same sort of height, late in the afternoon, it came across curious footprint in the snow. Report was caused by a certain amount of public attention, got a certain amount of public attention in Britain. So it'd be good to cover this one. I don't want to cut this one off. So we'll go for another little quick break. And then, yeah, just play that. Exiled Minds Podcast. Just take another quick look break. Streaming live on Rumble, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, and soon to be on the Troubled Minds Radio Network going live as well. But you can catch replays on there anyway. KUAP Digital Broadcasting. Check it out. It's like Live 365 Troubled Minds, or just KUAP Radio should do it. Anyway, back in just a second.
Okay, easy, sir. Captain Joyner, United States Army Special.
If you keep your head down without you, it's a very rare man. You can trust yourself and all without you. I can't. I'm a little man. I'm a little man.
People from your world have been here before. Yes. We are interested in your species.
I should have been a parent. Ragged claws.
You are a strange species. Not like any other. You'd be surprised how many intelligent and savage.
Hey, Vincent, why do they call aliens chicks?
Because they look like chicos. They're like fleas. They burrow themselves in your skin.
To me, they look more like praying mantis.
You don't understand the first thing about humans. They're at their most formidable when they're threatened.
That challenge is one that we're willing to accept. One we are unwilling to postpone.
You are at your very best and your worst.
You're tuned into Troubled Minds Radio Network on KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where we peer into the future, embrace the power of AI, and delve deep into the conspiracies that shape our world.
Are you looking for a way to connect with your spirituality? Look no further than Spirit Magica Crystal Shop. They have a wide variety of crystals, from amethyst to obsidian and more, including crystal packs, unique deals, and amazing customer service. The products are made with the highest quality materials and are backed by their satisfaction guarantee. Spirit Magica Crystal Shop are committed to helping you find the tools and resources you need to live a magical life. So what are you waiting for? Visit Spirit Magica today. Use coupon code Troubled Minds, all one word, at checkout for 25% off your first purchase.
KUAP Digital Broadcasting, the Troubled Minds Radio Network.
Making me crazy. I'm reaching out. I'm reaching out.
Yo. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for bearing with us at the break there. A shout out to Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. You should see it just down there. And then you can follow that link. Go and check it out. It's a great station. So big things coming. We're going out of beta. We're going in the numbers soon. So do all the support. And and follow the Exiled Minds podcast. Normally streaming it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. GMT. So I've had a few disruptions. I've been busy this time of year, but yeah, should keep it consistent from now on. And yes, today, Exiled Minds podcast, talking about the mystery of the Yeti. I've had a look at some of the main sightings, and we've seen that the Sasquatch has, in Bigfoot type sightings, there's over 3,000 of them, and that was from 10 years ago numbers. So there's probably a few more now. So there's been thousands of them. So I'm going to say this, these Yeti sightings, more, you're not going to see them as much. They're just in places where they're just not going to be. So there's not many people, like up in Everest. So anyway, we'll go on to, we've looked at 7 of the most notable sightings, and we'll go for number 8 now. So we've got another one. So there's top 10 here. So sighting number 8, we've got Eric Shipton, Mount Everest. He's seen this in 1951. He said it was at one of the glaciers of Menlong Basin, the Menlong Basin, at the height of about 19,000 feet. Again, it's all around 20,000 feet. Late in the afternoon, we came across those curious footprints in the snow, and the report of which was caused a concern to the public interest in Britain. So they say it caught the attention and concern of the British public. It said we did not follow them further than was convenient, a mile or so, for we were carrying heavy loads at the time. And besides, we had reached a particularly interesting stage of the exploration of the basin. I have in the past found many sets of curious footprints and have tried to follow them, but I've always lost them in the moraine or on the rocks as the side of the glaciers. So these particular ones seem to be very fresh, probably not more than 24 hours old. When Murray and the Bordelian followed us through later, the tracks had almost been obliterated by melting. So he says only a few days later, people who have followed after them had almost completely melted away. So that's another thing with the Himalayas. A lot of the time, the only real evidence, because the environment's changing, is like we've mentioned before. Because the environment's going to be changing all the time in a snowy environment. And so the trails are always changing and disappearing. And so it's really hard to be able to follow them. And like I say, you're carrying your equipment. We're not built for the snow. We're not rugged like that. We're not built. All the apes are more rugged than us. So something to consider. You just can't follow them. So only a few days, the tracks have been almost completely obliterated by the melting. It goes on to say that Sen Tenzing, who had no doubt he had no doubt that whatever the creatures had been at least two, he said the tracks were definitely that of the Yeti, and at least two of them, or the wild men, as they call them as well. He told me this 2 years before. He had a number of Sherpas that had seen one of them at a distance of about 25 yards in Thrang Boch. He described it as a half man, half beast, standing about 5 feet 6 inches, with a tall pointed head, with a tall pointed head, and a body that curved. And his body was covered in a reddish brown hair, but he was hairless on the face. He had left no doubt to his sincerity. So he's saying that Sherpa, so this is genuine. And there's known other people that have had these encounters as well. And then, writing in the Times, it said, the tracks were most distorted by melting into oval impressions, slightly longer and a good deal broader than those made by mountain boots. But here and there, where the snow covering the ice was thin, we came upon a well-preserved impression of the creature's foot. It showed 3 toes and a broad thumb to the side. What was particularly interesting was that the tracks crossed the crevasses. One could see quite clearly where the creature had jumped and used his toes to secure purchase on the snow, and then on the other side. We followed the tracks for more than a mile down the glacier before it got too much ice cover in and they had to kind of turn back. So there's another one, and they got this kind of side form. And I think it was same with the Sasquatch. With looking into that, what little I know about that, the idea with that one, I think, is that it's got an ankle bone that can rotate in certain ways that other apes haven't got, more like ours, and so it can do more of a 360. It can move around, so it can angle its foot better on rugged terrain. So yeah, and apes are kind of like using the feet as hands, aren't they? So if you can use your feet like hands as good as your arms, it kind of makes sense that you'd be a lot more mobile, wouldn't you? I think you would, because you sort of got a lot more control. People aren't used to using the feet as hands, but so you can do all of that. It doesn't matter which way up you are and stuff, does it? You know. But anyway, moving on. Moving on to sighting number 9. Again, another officer, Colonel John Hunt. He saw it in Everest in the 1950s. Okay. So in his book of the successful 1953 British expedition, he described an interesting encounter just after reaching base camp in Thang Boch Monastery. This afternoon, we paid our first official visit to the monastery at the invitation of the monks. There was a simple ceremony to perform on arrival, and laying on scarves at the thrones of the present abbot, as he, a young boy, was away in Tibet. Coached in his formality by Tenzing, he also presented to the acting abbot an expedition flag. We were briefly shown around the sanctuary, after which a meal was served in an upper room. Seated with Charles Wiley and Tenzing beside our hosts, we have these rotund figures robed in faded red, and I questioned him about the Yeti, better known to us as the Abominable Snowman. The old dignitary at once warmed to the subject. Peering out the window on the meadow where their tents were pitched, he gave a most graphic description of how the Yeti had appeared from the surrounding thickets a few years back in the wintertime, when the snow lay on the ground. And this beast loping along sometimes on his hind legs and sometimes on all fours, stood about 5 feet high and was covered with grey hair, a description which we have heard from other eyewitnesses. Oblivious of his guests, the abbot was reliving a sight imprinted on his memory, like he just went into the motion as he steered across the scene of the event. And I don't know what it's describing here. When you're going in a memory, you're kind of just looking nowhere with your eyes. You're kind of seeing it in your mind's eye and just telling it. And you can tell when people are concentrating and the cogs are going and telling you a story. And when it just rolls off as well, it's like they already know the story and they're going through the events sort of thing. Whereas a person that's making stuff up along the way, they usually have to take a lot of breaks and start contradicting themselves, you know. But yeah, he's doing that thing where he's just thinking, looking at his imagination. So the old monk he said the Yeti had stopped to scratch. The old monk gave a good imitation, but went on and explained that than he need done to make. Oh yeah, it says he was doing a bit too good imitation, but it went on longer than was really necessary. But he's wanting to let him know that adds weight for it to me. He's wanted to really show him. And he had picked up the snow and played with it at the end of a few grunts. So he got some snow and everything the monk did to like show him this how it acts. Again, he gave us a convincing rendering. The inhabitants of the monastery had meanwhile worked themselves into a great state of excitement, and the instructors were given to dive off the unwelcome visitor. Conch shells were blown, and as they do, they blow the horns and that, and along with the traditional horn sounds, and the Yeti enabled a way into the brush. So they tried to scare it off with horns. So I suppose that's a good one, really, because some of them horns are quite deep, aren't they? Could sound like a scary animal. So that's the one from Colonel John Hunt, Everest in the 50s, talking to monks about this Yeti. So he's got an account from there, and he's seen them footprints as well. And then in that was the 9th one then, and the last sighting before we move on to this next thing. Number 10 then, for top 10 Yeti sightings. We've got Don Willens, and this was seen in Anandpunan in Nepal in 1970. So in 1970, a colourful climber and a Manchester plumber, Don Willens, saw strange footprints near his camp in Annapurna. At their Annapurna temporary base camp, he found and photographed footprints, and later that night watched the ape-like creature about a quarter of a mile through his binoculars in the bright moonlight for about 20 minutes. So this guy got a good long-ass sighting. Yeah, and I bet the thing thought it couldn't be seen very well at night. So Willens could clearly see the powerful animal bounding along on all fours and headed straight up the slope in the absolute bright moonlight. It looked like an ape. I don't think it was a bear. In the morning, he said, his stash of Mars bars had gone. The next morning, he went up to make a full reconnaissance of the permanent base campsite, and he took the Sherpas along with him to gauge the reactions to the tracks. I thought I'd see the reactions at the point where I'd photographed the tracks the day before. The tracks were so obvious that it was impossible not to make any comment, but they walked straight past and didn't indicate that they'd seen them. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Just blanking them. Okay. I'd already said, he goes on to say, I'd already said that I had seen a Yeti, not knowing exactly what it was, but they pretended they didn't understand and they ignored what I said. I'm convinced that they believe the Yeti exists, that this is some kind of sacred animal, which is best left alone, that if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. So does the Yeti really exist is the question. And this from Graham Hoyland. He's got a book. I say he's been 20 times, done the investigation. He's got a book called Yeti, An Abominable History. And he discusses the above sightings in more detail, including his own, as he went back to Bhutan and found something remarkable. So he's leaving that for you to check the book out. So that's from Graham Holland. And so, yes, so we've got some sightings then, and it looks like there was thousands of the Sasquatch and the Bigfoot, So that's quite a few, really. That's only 10. And that's just coming from one guy who's just done a bit of his own investigation. But I thought, give him some shout out for Graham Hoyland for going out there and having a look for us. And I've got another one here from, just to show some of these things are recorded in history. We've got from the archivefoundation.org. We've got one of the official reports here, Yeti sighting and rules circa 1959. Okay, so the National Archives Museum shares 1959 Statement Department memo about the Yeti, the long-feared abominable snowman and relative of Bigfoot. Study this document carefully before planning a climbing expedition to find this creature. Obviously, disclaimer there, if you are just going to go off in the mountains, make sure you know what you're doing and you've got the right equipment and the training. Anyway, believed by some to live in the Himalayan mountains, interest in the Yeti spiked during the 1950s when Western climbers ascending Mount Everest reported Yeti footprints, as we talked about. This promoted the government of Nepal to issue regulations for Yeti hunting expeditions, including you've got to pay the government for a permit of 5,000 rupees, which is about just over $1,000 today's currency. And if you photograph or capture the Yeti, but you can't kill it, you've got to turn it over to the Nepalese officials, and any photos or information of Yeti sightings will have to be turned over to Nepalese officials as well. So they mentioned earlier that they're a bit difficult, perhaps, and I think they're very protective of this stuff by the looks of it, and it's sort of quite integral to the culture. It says, jump back to the script. So I just want to make the point there that Nepalese, they seem to know about it, that it's a thing. The Nepalese government seem to be like, yeah, no, nothing. And unless they get to know you and you've been asking like the reporter, like Graham Hoyland did, and went around and got to know people, been 20 times, I think they're keeping it quiet, the locals, like you say. And why not, right? Because we'll probably want to kill one or get it in a lab maybe, or want to test it, or maybe someone wants to sell it to be the first person. You know what I'm saying? So you can kind of understand why they might want to protect it. So that's, that is understandable. But then I thought, because it's saying there's a lot of cultural significance, I was thinking, you know what? It mentioned there's extreme conditions and you might hallucinate. But I've said, I've said to this computer, the hallucination-induced idea. It says extreme cold weather can potentially lead to hallucination or altered perception due to various factors. So they're saying they could have imagined it if in the Himalayas, because hypothermia and exposure to extreme cold can lead to hypothermia, and then the body loses heat faster than it can produce it, and that can impair judgment, and in really severe cases may hallucinate, right? But it's reaching a bit. Isolation and sensory deprivation could lead to hallucinating these things. In cold environments, people might experience isolation and sensory deprivation due to limited visibility, sound distortion in snow-covered landscapes, and the reduced social interaction. The isolation and sensory monotony could potentially trigger hallucinatory experiences or heightened perception. Okay, so it could be just the extreme cold, maybe. And stress and fatigue. Surviving in extreme cold can be physically and mentally exhausting. So fatigue, stress, lack of sleep might lead to hallucinations or altered perceptions. Okay, so altered perception comes up a couple of times there, right? Altitude sickness. There's another possibility. So I've got to look at the science on it. So in the mountains, regions where the Yeti sightings are often reported, you've got altitude sickness problems as well. So that could be a possibility. And it can cause symptoms like confusion, disorientation, hallucinations due to the reduced oxygen levels at high altitudes. While cold weather itself won't directly cause hallucinations, the combination of factors in the extreme conditions of isolation, physical stress with altitude effects combined with altered mental states could potentially lead to hallucinatory experiences or distorted perception, right? But I was like, but on this induced hallucination though, that's extremely rare anyway, for that to happen. Is it probably not the best explanation, especially when talking about people who are familiar with those conditions and they're born there and they live there, local people in the Himalayas? like that, they're already going to know all about snow and cold, right? So see what the AI thinks. And it's like, yeah, pretty smart one. He's like, yeah, you're correct. Pointing out the hallucination-induced environmental conditions like extreme cold weather is relatively rare and might not fully explain the consistency of stories. Oh, it also can't explain people are going to have different hallucinations, aren't they? There won't be any consistency to the claims of the sightings if it's just random hallucinations because of cold weather. But there often are similarities as reported by people within the Himalayas. So with these 3 different types. So they're not all just random, it could be anything if it's hallucination, couldn't it? Instead of a consistent thing. Or is it? Is it something? Is that a clue? You still see the same thing even if it is a hallucination. Although local inhabitants in the Himalayas, they're accustomed to harsh conditions, aren't they? And they're going to be less susceptible to extreme environmental induced hallucination. So they're probably the least likely. The locals are probably the least likely people to hallucinate because of the cold weather, right? So I argue. So this local folklore, it says when discussing sightings and stories related to the Yeti or similar folklore creatures in the Himalayas and cultural beliefs, there are oral traditions and there are psychological impacts of living in remote places. Talked about that. And it's a challenging environment, so it might play a more significant role solving attributing these accounts to hallucinations. So yeah, the Yeti means something to these people. We can see that the government's quite protective. So I'm thinking that's the angle to look at it from. Then try and understand it and try and understand them. And so then I'm thinking, okay, look at the local folklore and cultural beliefs, and these often intertwine with the natural surroundings. And it's very Shinto thing, very kind of Tai Chi kind of thing, one with nature, right? And the stories of mythical creatures like the Yeti could stem from a combination of factors from cultural heritage, stories of mythical creatures, that are often passed down through generations, and they can become sort of that can be like one of those things where I'll get myself on camera. Stop that. Yeah. Cultural heritage that can play an important part. Like the dragons are an important so that's quite an iconic symbol, isn't it, for like China and stuff. So stories of mythical creatures are often passed down through generations and become integral to the culture, identifying of the community, part of their identity. So the Yeti might be part of rich folklore in Himalayan cultures. And there's symbolism and spirituality to consider as well. Mythical creatures often hold symbolic and spiritual significance in local beliefs. The Yeti might represent something beyond the physical creature, embodying elements of nature, spirituality, and cultural beliefs. There could be a misinterpretation or exaggeration of the sightings, I suppose, maybe. But the community's identity, the concept of the Yeti, could also serve as a way to bond communities together, preserving their own unique identity and traditions. And I suppose that could be part of it. Maybe you want something to believe in because it's harsh there and you're all kind of maybe spread out a bit, and maybe you need something for your belief. I don't know about that. I'm not sure if I'm really up on that one. But anyway, yes. So I said, okay, exactly how many yeses? We looked at that, and there's probably there's a few of them out there enough to look at it. Okay, so then what comes next? I'll jump on the script proper. Here we go. So then I got thinking about, all right then, so if there's cultural explanations and we're talking altered perception, then I got thinking about trance work and talk about, I was thinking, okay, is there a way that we can go with hallucinations? Because it's not, especially the Himalayan stuff, it's hard to get the evidence, hard evidence. But are we missing this? Because in the extended DMT experiments that have been done recently, they invented a type of dimethyltryptamine that can give people a much longer experience. And they're apparently meeting entities there, and people are seeing the same entities and describing them the same. So maybe I'm thinking, is trance and altered perception a part of the culture? Because I'm pretty sure it is. So maybe you only see the Yeti in trance or in altered perception situations. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's something else. Maybe one of these three, or maybe I'm thinking maybe there's a physical one, or maybe there's a non-physical one as well. If they've got 3 different descriptions and different sizes, Maybe one of them's kind of in trance at least, or maybe all of it is. It's the same thing, but in trance. So I thought, is that part of the culture? So going back to the hallucination explanation, we can have that without dismissing the accounts of them. And could we find the answer in the concept of trance? Isn't that part of Himalayan cultures, particularly with shamans? Ask the computer that, and it spit back. Absolutely, you're on point with that observation. Nice one, bruv. Ooh. Anyway, yeah, so you're absolutely on point with that. Yeah, trance states, altered consciousness, or spiritual experiences are indeed significant aspects of Himalayan cultures and are often associated with shamans or spiritual leaders within these communities. All right. So I went down the trance route, and it turns out I knew it. I knew they were on the trancing. Hey, it's Bobby Broadway in the chat. Let's see you. Doc Davis in the shower, raising and listen while clipping toenails naked. Yeah, man. Might as well exfoliate while you're there. Know what I mean? Anywho, yeah, so trance states, trance-like states. Yeah, trance states and shamanistic practices that do that, do that though, don't do that. Right? That's what they do. So shamanistic practices often involve entering altered states of consciousness to communicate with spirits, performing healing rituals, or gaining insights. These altered states of consciousness might involve rhythmic drumming, chanting, meditation, or the use of psychoactive substances to induce trance-like experiences. In these altered states, individuals may perceive visions, encounter spirits, or experience a heightened sense of connectedness with the spiritual world. These experiences are deeply rooted in the cultural and spiritual fabric of Himalayan societies. I knew it. They're all about the trance stuff. They're about trancing and the rhythmic drumming and the oh my body meal, oh my body meal. You know what I mean? Get in there. Oh, right? They're on it. Tibet as well. And plus you got like they call it Mahayana Buddhism from that way. They call it the Great Vehicle. You know, so yeah, they're on the stuff that that's where the Dalai Lama and the Buddha things kind of likes to keep coming in. So I don't know, they seem to be on the stuff. So going on then, so the computer seems to think it is possible that some of these reported sightings of the mythical creatures like the Yeti could be influenced by or interpreted through these cultural practices involving, altered consciousness. So encounters or visions experienced during trance states could contribute to the narratives surrounding legendary beings like the Yeti and shaping the stories, the beliefs of the communities. So that's why understanding the cultural and spiritual context of these regions is crucial. I knew there's some stuff. So when exploring, when you explore accounts of mythical creatures, you've got to look at it in the local context because you might miss some stuff, might misinterpret it. You don't want to, but then you can miss some clues, some nice little bits of gold information as well. That does lead more to like something weird, But the experiences of shamans or individuals in these trance-like states could contribute to the richness of the folklore and legends, potentially influencing reported sightings and the interpretations of the encounters of the mysterious beings like the Yeti. So here's the deal. Oh, I've got to go for another break. Oh, that's the deal. Oh, so here's the deal. It could be more about the trance. It could be happening in trance, and it's kind of a lot bit more metaphor. But we'll see. We'll see, because they've got 3 different types and some kind of physical stuff. So, but anyway, we've got to take another break. Exiled Minds Podcast, Amelia and Martin, talking about the Yeti. Back soon.
EMP digital broadcasting, where we delve into the mystical, philosophical, and the cosmic in our quest to uncover the unknown.
House Oversight Committee did vow to open hearings about UFOs.
Have you ever been Outcast, because you nerd out on topics like ghosts, extraterrestrials, conspiracy theories, cryptids, or anything that isn't mainstream. Do you love exploring different theories, both known and perhaps unknown? If so, join Serena on the Paranormal and Proud podcast and take a journey and see if these topics have more rabbit holes and explained away conclusions by the mainstream. In fact, why not explore yourself? Indeed, why not explore together? Shall we? Tune in to the Paranormal and Proud podcast with your host Serena on the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP, digital broadcasting.
Environmentalists don't give a shit about the planet. They don't care about the planet. Not in the abstract, they don't. You know what they're interested in? A clean place to live. Their own habitat. They're worried that someday in the future they might be personally inconvenienced. Narrow, unenlightened self-interest doesn't impress me. Besides, there is nothing wrong with the planet. Nothing wrong with the planet. The planet is fine. The people are different. The planet is fine. The planet is doing great. It's been here 4.5 billion years. You ever think about the arithmetic? The planet has been here 4.5 billion years. We've been here what? Maybe 200,000.
Watching our TV while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
Environmentalists don't give a shit.
We know things are bad, worse than bad.
And we've only been engaged in heavy industry for a little over 200 years. 200 years versus 4.5 billion. And we have the conceit to think that somehow we're a threat, that somehow we're going to put in jeopardy this beautiful blue-green ball that's just floating around the sun.
They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy.
Been through all kinds of things worse than us. Been through earthquakes, volcanoes, plate tectonics, continental drifts, solar flares, sunspots, magnetic storms, the magnetic reversal of the poles. Hundreds of thousands of years of bombardment by comets and asteroids and meteors, worldwide floods, tidal waves, worldwide fires, erosion, cosmic rays, recurring ice ages. And we think some plastic bags and some aluminum cans are going to make a difference?
Please, at least leave us alone in our living room.
Welcome back from the break. Exiled Minds Podcast. With me, your incredibly famous host, Liam Martin. Talking about the mysteries of the Yeti. Oh, yes. So what we're doing today, we're going to wrap up because we've looked at some of the potential sightings, linked it up to see that, you know, there's a difference, a regional difference between what we call them, the Sasquatch, the Yeti, and all of that, the Bigfoot. And it's more North America. They got interchangeable Bigfoot and Sasquatch. A lot of the sightings are seen in the West. And I'm reckoning it's probably something very similar to this Yeti, but that's because it's such a, you know, in the Himalayas, it's such a harsh place. You're not going to see it that often. And then the tracks get, you know, it's just in snow. They get melted away, as we've seen just within a few days, completely distorted, got no idea. So it's hard to catch it. But then it also, as a debunking way, we talked about altered perception and potentially hallucinating it because of the conditions might be a thing. But trance and altered perception is an integral part of the Tibetan culture. So perhaps, as I've heard in 90s trance, perhaps you don't get to see the Yeti when you're in trance. And so that's the thing. That's the trick of it. Maybe you have to be slightly altered to see it, or at least one of them, because there's these footprints, and they're obviously physical, if that's from one of these creatures. And they've got having consistent descriptions. So that's also one of the reasons why the BBC article I've got here also talked about how this stuff might actually be for real. I'm saying it could be in trance as well. Maybe some of them are in trance and some of them for real. Maybe they're interdimensional. But from the bbc.co.uk, they had a little feature there with 7 reasons why the Yeti might actually exist. The idea of a hairy ape-like creatures roaming around the Himalayas has been around for centuries. But could the Yeti actually be real? So there's BB4 documentary series Yeti. Intrepid explorer Andrew Benfield goes on the epic journey through India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Bhutan in search of the truth behind these stories. Together with his more skeptical friend, Richard Horsey, they hear surprisingly consistent descriptions of the mysterious, large, hairy creature from local people. And supposedly there's a bonus bit where they're going to have the results of some DNA tests and some mysterious hair samples. So let's have a look at this then. So the first reason. We've got, was this 7 reasons? Yeah, 7 reasons. The first reason they're given why this thing might actually be real is the consistent sightings and descriptions. There are consistent stories and descriptions of this creature from, here, I can get myself up on camera on this one. Here we go. Okay, so number 1, there are consistent sightings and descriptions, and there are consistent stories of this creature from across the region, coming from people in some of the most remote areas who have little to no contact with each other or the outside world. So it's going to be rarely seen of people, so they're going to be notable. These are not just fairy tales of, and sometimes picture a strange footprint, but rather first-person sightings and even reports of physical encounters on livestock and people, as we've heard. While some of these accounts might be explained away by misidentifying a bear on its hind legs or an overactive imagination, others involve multiple witnesses, physical evidence, and even police reports. And so these are not so easily dismissed. In many parts of the Himalayas, the Yeti's existence is an accepted fact. And one country, Bhutan, has even created a national park specifically for the protection of its natural habitat. David Attenborough thinks the Yeti could exist. Some quite smart people think it may exist, including Sir David Attenborough. Tenzing Norgay, the first person to summit Mount Everest, along with Sir Edmund Hillary, as I've mentioned, and even Alexander the Great, they thought that it was for real, and say Sir David Attenborough thinks it could be. Sir David was asked in a 2013 interview if he thought there were still any big creatures left out there for science to discover. He responded by immediately suggesting the Yeti. That was really convinced me that there was something to this, and it wasn't just chasing after unicorns. The fact that Sir David Attenborough points to the Yeti straight away as a potential big creature that science is yet to discover. So that's pretty weighty. Third reason why they think the Yeti might actually exist, BBC. The Western perception of the Yeti is all wrong, but none of these people are talking about the big white fluffy snow monster from the cartoons and B-movies. That's the thing, it's not really like that. We've heard descriptions already that it's, more red or brown. One of them described it as grey. So I think snow, just took some artistic license for that, and then back in the 50s. But yeah, that was the image of the Western name, the Abominable Snowman, and that was the image in your head. It's, from the Westernized invention of the 50s. This helped ensure that it's consigned firmly to a fantasy realm, because there's been films about it. People think, oh, not true. So, yes, this helped to ensure that it was consigned firmly to the fantasy realm for people outside the mountains. Obviously, because they hadn't had any real encounters, you think, nah. And but if it's local to you, keep hearing about it, you're going to believe in it, aren't you? A bit more. So what the local people instead of describing a big white monster, abominable snowman, they describe a brown-haired bipedal mammal that looks something like a giant orangutan or gorilla. So it's an upright walking ape. Like we talked about the pre-hominids previously on the Lloyd Pye show. Yeah, this is pre-hominids. Got this upright walking apes, and yeah, there's sudden jumps in it as well. It seems, but yeah. So so there might be other apes. Like there might be some apes out there that we've just not come across yet. Like gorillas were thought to be a myth, but then they turned out to be a thing. So the fourth reason then why they might actually be real from the BBC is there's actual evidence of an ancient giant Himalayan ape. And here's the kicker. We know that there did used to be a giant ape roaming around the Himalayas because we have fossil evidence to prove it. This was the 9-foot-tall Gigantopithecus. Its closest known living relative is the orangutan, but Sir David Attenborough believes the descendants of the Gigantopithecus might still be surviving in the most remote parts of the mountains. And someone says here, and we really shouldn't argue with this British national treasure. So, yeah, Gigantopithecus, that's usually the normal explanation. It used to be this massive gorilla-type creature. It used to live up that way. So, yeah, it could be some, descendants of that. And that's what we're looking at. And I suppose, like, as Dark Devious says in the chat, the apes at the minute, I suppose they're like in the Stone Age. And we heard about one of them had a bow in one of the sightings, a primitive bow. So maybe they're, like I say, in that Stone Age kind of place, isn't it? So maybe they will evolve. I don't know. But we'll go on the chat there. Let's have a look in the comments. Oh, they're doing magic. Oh, they're doing magic and doing card tricks. Wow. Bobby Broadway just comes in, floating on a card. Counting, card counting, talking about. I want to try ESP. Yeah, do your ESP, Bobby Brown. Bobby Broadway. Yeah, learn some ESP. Learn some remote viewing. Get it on the Farsight thing. You can learn to be an instructor as well. They do certified instructor courses too. If you want to learn remote viewing, and then you can be one of the few instructors teaching scientific remote viewing the Farsight way. Anyway, what are they saying in these comments then? So yes, God. Always wanted to learn more from the band on stage. Okay. Try ESP. Let's put that up as an advert. All right, yeah, there we go. Try ESP. We can leave that up for a minute. Yes. Okay. So try telekinesis. Okay. Tried that in first grade. Specifically remember trying to move things at the time of my mind. 43 now. Had no luck. Only when I fall on something, things move. Got scared, and statues flew across the room. It was either me or a ghost, and it dented the cement wall. I always suspected it was a ghost. Ghost was with my mum. Oh, you got ghost stories in here as well, and magic. Oh, that's pretty. Check that. Check you. Nice little ghost stories there. And doing magic as well. And we're talking about weird apes, aren't we? Yeah, maybe we should do a ghost show. I know we've done a ghost show. We'll get James on. Should we get James on and do a ghost show? Maybe. A Christmas ghostly encounter. But anyway, yes. Yeah, lock your doors. Always a good one. Great. What does Marie say? Okay, grey hairy. Do that one as well. Yeah, look. The grey haired ones must be old. Perhaps that's what it is. The old silver foxes. That's actually a decent enough point, I'd go with that. Because as you get older, you lose the colour pigment, don't you? More stress in that. And the longer you live in a cold-ass environment, probably the more stress you get, I would think. I'm sick of this. What's the song coming? Just kidding. But yeah, that sort of makes sense. And also, I reckon grey would blend in better. I think grey would blend good as well, I think it'll blend a bit better because it's not, I don't know. I think that'd work. A bit like black's not the perfect nighttime color, supposedly, according to the ninjas. They went like really dark blue sort of thing. The black's a bit too much of an outline. I think it's supposed to be something like that. But anyway, let's put one up, get rid of that. Okay, so back on. What else we got? No, you talk what you like. Talk what you like. Get blessed in. It's nice to have the community in the chat. It's nice to know people there. I'm just talking to myself. But anyway, yes, let's get back on with these then. So I remembered to look at the chat though, so that's good. Okay, so we've had so we've got 7 reasons why the BBC might think that this thing actually exists, the Yeti. Consistent sightings and descriptions. So David Attenborough and some of those officers from who were discussed from, last couple of centuries, they believed it could well be real. Western perception of the Yeti is wrong. Not necessarily the big white abominable snowman. More of a brown-haired bipedal. Some of it say it's grey. Some of it say there's a shorter red one as well. We've got Gigantopithecus, ancient ape. So it could be descendants of that, which kind of makes sense. Some other upright apes we haven't, and maybe that's part of the same family where that so-called star child skull comes from. Maybe that's one of these older species that's just been sort of missed off the sort of list. And remember, the Western perspective previously dismissed stories of the panda, the hippo, and the giraffe, and like we've mentioned, the gorilla as well. They're saying all of those are fantastical inventions. So yeah, we didn't used to believe in pandas or hippos and giraffes. But they look weird, don't they, giraffes? I'll give you dues on that one, but we didn't think they were real, and they were. Well, accepted now, aren't they? In fact, you can see them at safari parks and stuff these days. So yeah. So yes, and in fact, there has been a long-standing historical bias in the West against believing in such accounts. So refuses to accept that the people in remote areas could possibly know something that outsiders don't already know, right? Which is rather ironic when it's the local people that's going to have the expertise on their own flora and fauna and terrain and climate. And that very knowledge is what keeps outsiders alive and well when they're paying a visit. You know what I'm saying? Without them Sherpas, you're done for, aren't you? So also, yeah, new species have been discovered all the time as well. So scientists regularly discovering new species out in the most remote areas of the globe, including some large mammals such as the antelope and the deer. And remember, like I say, Westerners, they believe in the panda, the hippo, and the giraffe and the gorilla. Okay. So reason number 6 why the BBC thinks the Yeti might actually be real is there are huge areas of the Himalayas that are still largely unexplored. We're talking about an immense unexplored area and some of the most inhospitable habitat for humans on Earth. Until you've walked for days in the Himalayas, it's hard to appreciate just how vast and inaccessible so many of these mountains and valleys really are, and how rarely, if ever, the majority see any human activity. Most people that go across there don't see anyone else at all. So there's a genuine topographical possibility for a creature to exist largely unseen. It'd be easier, I keep sort of hinting at that, but yeah, it'd be easier to just hide out there. We just can't explore, like super thick jungles as well. When the thicket is just too much to get through. Sometimes, jungles, it can be really hot and you're getting bit and stuff, and sometimes you just can't penetrate deep enough to sort of find things, so. Okay, reason number 7 why bbc.co.uk thinks that the Yeti might actually be real. We're taking a different approach, heads up. Of course, Richard and I wouldn't be the first foreigners to go to the Himalayas looking for the Yeti, but nearly everyone before us has taken what felt a rather arrogant approach, thinking they could spot something in a few weeks that the locals are lucky to see once a lifetime. What I proposed to Richard was a different tact. Rather than trying to see it for ourselves, we would focus on tracking down credible local stories. Taking these more seriously, I believed, was the best way to eventually get our hands on some genuine physical evidence, such as bone or hair samples. Then we could get those samples scientifically tested and prove that it came from the creature that's previously unknown. to the lowlanders at least. My arguments somehow persuaded Richard and his PhD to come along in the role of responsible accompanying adult, although at first I think he was mainly just humouring his eccentric friend. But his scepticism soon began to wane as we ended up finding much, much more than either of us could have bargained for. So why not challenge, we could challenge your own perception to the assumptions and you could go and join the epic adventure, but across Nepal, India, Myanmar and Bhutan. But if you do, be prepared to be pushed as we are to the absolute limit. So it says that, they went, and I can't play the documentary, but it says they went all the way to the absolute limit. And I think they went on to find some of this hair samples I've seen in this, where someone had handed in some, I'll quickly read it here. A previous study recently published in Proceedings B and based on 2 purported Yeti samples, limited genetic data, they had speculated it to be unclassified and a possibility of a hybrid bear species which might be present in the region. But this preliminary finding had been questioned. Our results refute the finding strongly, suggesting the biological basis of the Yeti legend is a local brown and black bear, not a mythical creature or previously unknown bear species. We were also surprised to find that the Himalayan brown bear, placed at the base of the brown bear family tree, is a sister lineage to all modern brown bears. Genetic relationships of the most of the world's brown bear population have been fairly well studied, but very limited data exists on the Himalayan brown bear, and it was not clear how these endangered and elusive bears from the northwestern Himalayan regions were related to other brown bear populations. It was a similar story with the Himalayan black bear. Our results indicate that both these bears populations diverged early and experienced long isolation from other bear populations, likely in response to major glacial events in the region. So they're saying it's kind of, you've kind of ended up, they've kind of lost the track in looking for, they've kind of lost the track in looking down the lineages of brown and black bears. So there's a bit of a break point. So then these ones might have evolved differently to, and so they'll become unknown if you get those genetic markers. They're kind of saying, well, it wouldn't necessarily be a Yeti. It could be this bear genetics that we've just not been able to map, sort of thing. But like I say, so some of these hair samples turned out to just be nothing. But that's not to say it's not legit. And if you just if you're on the video, you can just take a look at these footprints. I mean, they've still got the footprints of something massive that's bigger than a bear and not got the right foot. And there's one here that I've just put on the camera for the video viewers. It's as big as a pickaxe. And, pretty long. We have reports of 16 to 18 inches long. So these are big feet and like 8 inches wide. So, that's a long, it's a big foot. It's a foot of foot. You know what I'm saying? So they are pretty impressive, the footprints. But like I say, could it be part of, instead of, maybe there is a physical one, and maybe it's just so hard to sort of get to that, we haven't made it, right? Just too extreme an environment. Maybe it's that. But like I say, I think part of this, because trance is part of the culture, then I think that's part of it as well. I think if you, because I've heard it in the trance musics and stuff, but I think that might be something in it with the trance, getting into a trance and the way that they do things, repetitiveness, and I suppose if you get into these altered states, you might be considered less threatening, and you're not going to do the stuff. If you do the work to kind of meet them in the middle, even if they're not like, well, in the DMT studies, let's quickly put this up. In the extended DMT studies, let's check this out. Look, extended DMT studies. What we've got here, I'll just share it on the screen. The psychonauts training for otherworld explanation. This is in newrepublic.com, but this is real studies you can read about. So it was Dr. David Luke that did these, but links will be in the description. So it's basically that Andrew Gilmore. Okay, much of the theory behind DMTX comes from the 2016 paper, The Frontiers in Physiology by Andrew Gilmore and Rick Strassman, who wrote DMT, the spirit molecule. They've basically invented something called DMTX, which lets you have an extended DMT experience, which usually would only last for about 15 minutes. So they've managed to stretch it, I think, for an hour. So then it's a bit more like people can take it in a bit more and see what happens and try and report back. And since they've been doing this, the Dreaming Jaguars boys, actually, they've been taking part in this, and so they've been acting as psychonauts basically, and they're trying to see what entities you're getting, and different people are going in and seeing the same entities popping up. So it looks like these characters are part of the experience in some way. So then it starts looking like these are the real entities and the spirits that we're hearing about, that they're reaching out to, trying to talk to, with these shamanistic kind of rituals, reaching out to the spirit forces. But that's no different to praying as well, reaching out to other sort of non-human entities. So there's that to consider as well. So I think a big part of this is that you get to see it in trance as well as a physical being. I think it's a two-tier thing with the Himalayan version. I know we've got the Sasquatch and the Bigfoot, and I'm not sure about that. Sometimes there's UFO lights reported around that kind of stuff. And people have once reported, a UFO sighting where there's a bunch of different beings, and there's a Bigfoot Yeti-looking creature was one of them. But let's say that they're anecdotal accounts, so it's hard to get the evidence. But I want to put the point forward that, these extended DMT experiences, you've got these repeated figures that keep coming up again and again, the same characters being described in the same way. So I'm going to have to assume that, there might be something to this. Why wouldn't you hallucinate different things? But these same entities are coming, being described the same. So I think there's definitely something to this. There's something deeper to explore, I think, with the trance work and the shamanism. So I'll probably do a separate show on that because we're coming to the end of the show now. But yeah, there's been over 3,000, that was 10-year-old data, 3,000 Sasquatch sightings. We've had a bunch through the centuries of the Yeti sightings. We've got some of the pictures, the large footprint that we're seeing, and we had the DMT studies with Andrew Galloway and Rick Strassman did a study. So I mean, you can check that out. I say that's on newrepublic.com, but links will be in the description anyway. So have a look, see what you think, because I think there might be something to the shamanistic practices, the repeating drumming and stuff, and then they'd know if he was doing the rituals as well, wouldn't they? If they're like, I don't know. See what you think. But yeah, I think part of this is trance, I reckon, altered states, and you do see the environment change and seem to have, like, you have the DMT experience. You can see like a tree start to look like they've got snakes in them. They're coming down all of a sudden. I've heard about that. So Algorithms jumped in the chat. He's been lurking. I'm finishing some work off. Nice stream. Keep up the good work. Oh, I appreciate that, bro. And then we need to do a stream together, me and you, somehow, or come in your thing or whatever. But yeah, keep talking about that. But I'm trying to be consistent now, Mike. So hopefully, I got my passport now as well, bro. Algorithm. I got my passport now. Check it out. I'll put it in a little wallet thing. I won't show my numbers. I'll just show the back of it. Check this. Got my passport. Finally, coming to America like Eddie Murphy. Coming to America. But anyway, I've got to shut the show down. So shut this show down. So you look after yourselves, folks. I'll go out with I'll play an alternate intro out. So we'll just do that. But thanks for tuning in and listening to me ramble about the mysteries of the Yeti. And yeah, go and check these things out for yourself. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP, Digital Broadcasting, and you look after each other. And take care of yourselves. I'll catch you soon. Catch you next week. I might do a bonus show over the weekend because I had to miss a day this week. We'll see how that pans out. Anyway, if not, see you next week, Tuesday. Be there or be square.